All right. The third cycle we're going to talk about is the nitrogen cycle. And the first thing you need to know is that nitrogen gas is the most plentiful gas in our atmosphere. It's biologically inert in that unless you are diving, it can be an issue with people who are, putting a mask on and diving, but for the most part, it's neither good nor bad, right? It's just out there. Now, when we talk about just the nitrogen gas, now, when we talked about the chemistry of life, we had said that proteins and nucleic acids contain nitrogen. So it is part of biomolecules. So it is part of me and part of you. Now, how do we get it? It's nitrogen gas is what we call inert. And so what that means is that it's not very reactive. So what we have is we have different kinds of microorganisms that are going to be responsible for moving nitrogen from the atmosphere into a form that can be used by life. And so we have bacteria that are able to be, are what we would call nitrogen fixing bacteria. And what a nitrogen fixing bacteria does is it takes atmospheric nitrogen and converts it into ammonia. Now, have you ever smelled that, you take that ammonia cleaner or, smelling salts. If somebody's going to pass out, they'll put some ammonia under their nose and you're like, wow, that's poisonous, which it is. But I mean, not that you have to worry about that because who's going to be breathing it? It's horrible, right? But anyway, so ammonia gets converted into ammonium. So, and then we have another kind of bacteria that will convert the ammonia into nitrite, and that's a nitrogen oxide compound. It's NO2 with a negative, so it's missing an electron. And then we have another set of bacteria that convert that nitrite into nitrate. Plants use nitrate as fertilizer, and they're able to use that form of nitrogen for the proteins and nucleic acids in them, and that's how you and I get the nitrogen that we need because we eat the plants. So we have these series of bacteria. Now, we haven't talked about microorganisms doing much of anything with the other two cycles. But here, we're talking about how we have microorganisms, bacteria and fungi, that are going to be really important in making that nitrogen, converting it into a form that can be used by life. Now, with you and I had mentioned that when you have excess water in your system, you pee it out, right? You release it to the outside. Well, but the main function, believe it or not, the main function of urine and that whole process is to get rid of waste nitrogen. So we said we have to have it as proteins and nucleic acids. But when we digest proteins and nucleic acids, we break them apart, and we had said that ammonia is very toxic, and that's what we break it down into. And so what your body does is it makes it into urea. Urea is a little bit toxic also, but not nearly as toxic as that horrible ammonia. So in you put it into two different forms, urea and something called uric acid. But in both cases, it's nitrogen-containing forms that can be released to the outside. So this is a cycle, right? So we had said we have nitrogen in the atmosphere. It gets converted into nitrate through this series of 3 different kinds of bacteria. And then the plants can utilize it. Then you and I can eat the plants. And in either case, in the place of us digesting a protein or of a plant decomposing. So if a plant dies, the same thing happens, right? The ammonia is released because the molecules break down. So then we have this ammonia that goes out there. Well, it ends up, we have also something called denitrifying bacteria. And what do? They convert ammonia into nitrogen gas. So this cycle, the nitrogen cycle, relies very heavily on microorganisms and decomposers. So whenever a person dies, an animal dies, a plant dies, the nitrogen gets released back into the atmosphere. Places where we have nitrogen, we have it in life and in the atmosphere. So these are the stores, and we had said that we have these cycles that are going on. So the nitrogen cycle relies very heavily on microorganisms. There is one other group of organisms. There is a type of fungi, or it's a type of fungus that is associated with beans, legumes. And you might, if you know anything about farming, you say, yeah, my family grows corn, but they also grow soybeans, and they rotate. And now the reason they do that is because something like corn or cotton, if you're in the South, uses a huge amount of nitrogen, and the soil gets depleted of nitrogen. Well, if you grow beans, legumes, they have a microorganism associated with them that are what we call nitrogen fixing. They're in nodules in their roots. And what can they do? They literally pull the nitrogen out of the air, so you don't have to add as much nitrogen to them. So this is another way that nitrogen is pulled in and made available to the plant. So people will rotate the crops because the corn and the cotton are using up all the nitrogen, and then you grow soybean and you add some more nitrogen back directly from the air without you having to do anything. Okay, so what do we have next? We have phosphorus. So we have the phosphorus cycle. Now, phosphorus is important in life for nucleic acids. So they have a phosphate backbone to them. So DNA, RNA, those kinds of things. And so the interesting thing about phosphorus is there is no phosphorus in the atmosphere. It is what we call, what is the term? It's a land-based, I can't think of the term for it, but it is the cycle that doesn't involve the atmosphere. So phosphorus, we have phosphates in the ground and dissolved in water. And it is another one of the, if you look at what is in fertilizer, you see that it contains nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So we just talked about the nitrogen, right? With the phosphorus is found in minerals, and it's found in water, and it's found in life. And so it is moving, it's a sedimentary cycle as opposed to an atmospheric cycle. That's the term I was trying to think of. So it is going to be cycling that way. Now, it's important in all life, but when we talk about land plants, the nutrient that is the biggest problem getting enough of is nitrogen. So for land plants, that's the biggest problems. For water plants, algae, plants in the water, the biggest problem is phosphorus. Now, what is some downsides? I'm mentioning something else about nitrogen. When you have nitrogen gas, it's stable in the atmosphere. But one of the things that you get through burning of coal, because we said coal is from life, right? So there's some nitrogen there. It goes into the atmosphere as nitrogen oxides, and that mixes with rain and forms an acid. So we get it. So we have nitrogen can lead to acid rain. So burning coal and that kind of, and gas too, releases nitrogen, which produces a problem there. But back to the phosphorus, the problem there is fertilizer runoff. So fertilizer runoff can cause algal blooms in water. And there's a video about Peggy. And so I want you have to watch it because, you might see this again. By the way, we have a test coming up soon. So Peggy's story, getting sick of phosphorus pollution. This is a water pollution, so it's a major problem in aquatic environments. So watch the story about Peggy, and one of the major points in it is there's a kind of a bacterium that's called a blue-green algae. And we have a lot of problems with phosphorus pollution and blue-green algae in Lake Erie. Peggy is based in Wisconsin, but watch that story and you can see how excess nutrients can lead to problems there. All right, so I'll come back. We have one more cycle to talk about sulfur. Be right back.